Okay. It's so cold out.
It is. It's really cold, but I love sweaters. So.
Me too. And well, you can't see, but I'm wearing boots. I love to wear boots. Okay, let's take attendance. All of you are on time, but everyone else is here. Okay, Amanda. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Mandy, Aya, Usma is here. I like saying that name, Usma. So pretty. Anna is here. Mandy is here. Erica is not. Evelyn is here. Okay. There's sex here. Oh, that's me. Okay, we'll get started. Maybe I'll even get you out a little early. Oops. So we're going to continue on with what we were talking about last time. Let me pull it up. Okay, so this is the last thing that we discussed last time. We were talking about order of acquisition and what is, here it is.
Recording in progress.
Okay. And someone just came in. And who is it that just came?
I just logged in, Professor.
Oh, okay, good. Clarissa. Okay, so where we ended up last time, we were talking about order of acquisition. Probably what is most notable by far about order of acquisition is that it pretty much happens in the same order across languages and cultures. That's pretty fascinating. People say, and it's true, that language and culture are very much tied together, but that's as we get older. But as babies, you know, what is built into our brain in terms of cognitive ability, right? And in terms of like that grammar, we're equipped for grammar. And we progress in terms of our cognitive ability pretty much in the same way, right? I think the example I gave was we don't really get the idea of permanence, whether someone can leave and then come back. Like if we can't see them at all, young baby doesn't know that they might be back, and that's why they cry. There's no concept of time until later on. Talk about that, how saying tomorrow, okay, we'll do that tomorrow, it's okay. Or, We ate that yesterday. What is yesterday? What is tomorrow? And not even to mention the time on the clock. And babies have no concept of that. But when they do, they're able to attach language to it. So the example we discussed on this slide was the word when. That's why it's not the first question, because they have to have a concept of time before they can ask the question when. Okay, so by the age of 4, most children can ask questions, give commands, report real events, and create stories about imaginary ones using correct word order and grammatical markers most of the time. That is incredible. It's incredible. I mean, forget about the leaps and bounds in terms of vocabulary. That by age 2 they know 50 words, and by age 5 it's 5,000. In addition to that, they're creating grammatical construction. They haven't even been to school yet. That is what's so fascinating when we ask the question, what makes this so interesting, so compelling, so exciting, and that's it. They're not just memorizing words or combinations of words. When they learn to speak, it's not just out of imitation, right? Because a lot of their constructions are brand new. In the preschool years, they also begin to use language in a variety of situations. So not just at home, but maybe out at the store, McDonald's, with various people besides their parents, with their teachers, in school settings. By the time they go to school, children are in contact with the language of their environment for 20,000 hours or more. Here we're talking about contact hours, hearing language for 20,000 hours or more. In a way, that's school in itself, right? They haven't even been to school, but they have all of these hours of exposure to language. It's pretty fast. Okay, now we're looking at the school years. So beyond preschool, when they're in kindergarten, first, second, third, right? So children develop and expand the ability to use language to understand others and to express their own. Okay, all of that is expanding. They're learning to read, boost metalinguistic awareness. Who knows what metalinguistic awareness? Anyone want to say yes? Well, go ahead.
I was going to say understanding your own thoughts about language.
Yes.
Oh, is it
exactly.
men?
So not just producing it, but thinking about it, as we do as adults, but it starts very early on, that awareness. In the school years, they learn that language has form as well as meaning. Okay, there's a right way to say it and write it, as well as a wrong way to say it and write it. Okay, and there's meaning attached to everything you say. As babies and toddlers, we're beginning to attach meaning to sound and meaning to words. But as we get older, we're doing it more and more, and we're thinking about the form it takes. In the school years, children have a perception that some words are longer than others, right? If you hear a word or see a word that's particularly long or particularly short, when you're in elementary school, you take note of it. You learn that words and sentences have multiple meanings. And this gives way to lots of jokes and trick questions. So when children are in elementary school, that's when they start telling jokes and riddles. Riddles involve plays on language. There was something from the previous slide. Oh, I wanted to ask you guys, because in the preschool years is when children start to have real vivid imagination, which allows them to begin to create stories. So what I wanted to know is how many of you had imaginary friends?
I don't think I had one.
Evelyn is laughing, so she must have.
I don't think I had one.
You did? Can you tell us about your imaginary friend?
I did, and it's kind of embarrassing. So I don't know. I had an imaginary friend, and it was from the movie Spider-Man. Because my
Oh, this was someone you had like borrowed from a movie. That's different.
so
Okay.
my dad used to watch the movie a lot, so then it became my movie. So then I was friends with Spider-Man.
That's great. Now, did he live any particular place or?
No, I would jump around the couches, like on top of the couches, and then pretend that I was swinging, like how he
Oh,
did.
wow. And do you remember what age that started?
No, I don't remember. I was little though. I remember I was little, and then my mom would yell at me to get off the couch.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Evelyn. Invisible friends or imaginary friends are very, very common and normal. Some parents don't know that, and when their child is talking about a friend, can't you see this friend right here? Sometimes they take them to like the doctor, they think something's wrong with the child, but it's actually very normal and it's healthy. It helps to build and create imagination. I had an imaginary friend, and I think I was 4 and 5 when I had the imaginary friend. And I got rid of him before I went to first grade. So his name was Billy, and he lived in the living room and back up. We had like the leather reclining chair. He lived back there. So when I went behind the chair, I'd be like talking to him. And before I went to first grade, he died in a plane crash. So we're also creative about like how we dispose of our imaginary friends because we're more ready to deal with the real world, to be a big girl or a big boy. And another thing to note is that girls have imaginary friends at a much higher rate than boys. I'm not sure why. I don't know if you guys have any ideas about that.
That's interesting.
Do we have any men present here? No. No, good. Okay, so I'll move on. Okay, so I was talking about the school years. And this is big, that they're learning that words and sentences have multiple meanings. This is also something that English language learners learn, and it's quite frustrating. It's one of the things that English is so difficult to learn. Vocabulary grows at a rate between several hundred and more than 1,000 words per year. And that's in the school year. That is tremendous. And it's mostly a function of reading, but it's also a function of conversation. And we're going to talk about that a little later. So also during the school years, children acquire different language registers. So I don't think I'll be going over this today, but probably next time I'll be talking about language registers. And according to linguists, there are 5 official language registers, all the way from very intimate language. That's the language we use with our twins or our absolutely best friend or maybe a very close sibling. And as an adult, that's the language you use with a significant other you've been with for a long time, whether that's a spouse or not. So from what we call intimate language all the way up to formal language. Formal language is more like speeches that we've memorized. And then there's everything else we talk about it in the future. So they're learning those registers, and they're learning, like, you know, I only use intimate language with someone I know well. I'm not going to use that language with my teacher. And the language I use with my teacher maybe is not the language that I use with my friend on the schoolyard. Okay, so they're beginning to distinguish those things. Okay, we're going to watch a short video on order of acquisition. And I like the content that's delivered in this video. He talks kind of fast, and I don't like the way the video is edited, so that can be a little distracting. But the information I think is really good.
So let's talk about babies. Very cute, right? It's hard to look at a baby smiling at you and not feel good. But even the most devoted parents don't generally think of their baby as a cognitive powerhouse, but babies figure out how language works like little geniuses. They're just born that way. I'm Moti Lieberman, and this is the Link Space.
Welcome to the Link Space.
Language is special. People can do a lot of amazing things. Ride a unicycle, learn long division, walk on the moon. But maybe the most amazing thing human beings do is language. Don't believe me? Just wait. So the most important idea for today's episode is the theory that the ability to learn and use language is biologically hardwired into the human brain. Babies are made to pick up the language that they hear around them, just sponging up those glorious sounds and structures and turning them into their mother tongue. The theory that language is something innate, something you're born with, is known in linguistics as nativism or generativism, and it's got a lot of really good evidence behind it. Before we start getting into what this means, though, let's be perfectly clear about what it doesn't. It doesn't mean that we're born with any particular language. No baby springs into the world with the ability to speak perfect English, or German, or Japanese. We don't come equipped with the rules or sounds or vocabulary of any language. That's all stuff we have to learn. What babies don't need to figure out is how language can work, what kind of words we can build, what types of sentences we can make, what sorts of interpretations we're allowed. These fundamental principles of language define what's possible and what's not, and they're the same for everybody. Anything that doesn't stick to the rules will never come up in any human language, ever. Given how many different languages there are, it might seem unlikely that there's one set of principles that can rule them all. But the idea comes to us from none less than the father of modern linguistics, Noam Chomsky. He called it universal grammar, or UG. There are a lot of arguments to back up the nativist position, but for today, we're just going to focus on 2 of them. So the first is that babies go through the same stages in development, no matter what language they're learning. The second is that infants master language way faster than they should if they're just little blank slate know-nothing babies. To be that fast, there's got to be something there to help them along. Let's start off with babbling, those adorable random syllables that little babies make. Except they're not really random. No matter what language they're learning, this early babbling uses the same set of sounds. One study examined the early babbling of babies from 15 different languages, including English, Thai, Japanese, Arabic, Hindi, and Maya. Languages where all they have in common is that they're spoken by people, The study found that these babies all prefer labial consonants, or sounds made with the lips, more than other consonants. Stop consonants like P and B, where the airflow through the mouth is totally blocked, over others, and vowels made low in the mouth like A and Ah, over those that are made higher up, like E and Oo. And all of that is independent of how often, or even whether at all, these languages make use of these sounds. Babbling Hindi learning babies make the same amounts of the same sounds that Arabic learning babies do. In fact, your average 8-month-old baby can differentiate between any pair of sounds used in any language in the world. Depending on your language, you might not be able to tell the difference between talk and talk, or between lock and rock, but your baby can. It makes sense. A baby needs to be prepared to pick up any language, so they better come equipped to hear anything that could be relevant. It's not just the way they deal with sounds that's the same for all infants. They all pick up words at the same approximate rate and stages too, and that's regardless of how the language they're learning works. It doesn't matter whether or not the babies hear motherese. That way of speaking slow and using easy words and intonation, like, "What a cute baby! Where's the kitty, baby?" It doesn't matter if the language has tone, like Mandarin, or doesn't, like English, or whether the verb comes at the beginning or end of the sentence. In fact, all babies in whatever language will start getting their first words around 10 to 12 months old. By 18 months, they've got about 50 words, and then they undergo a crazy vocabulary spurt, picking up hundreds of words over the next few months, so that by around 2, they'll have about 500. And then they start going even faster. Your average 2.5-year-old is glomming up new words at the rate of about 10 a day. That's faster than your average 3-credit undergraduate language course. So the way the kids make sounds, the way they pick up words, it's all the same worldwide, in Chicago or Tokyo or Cairo or Bangkok. And since the languages they're learning are all so different, this tells us something fundamental about the human brain. How babies learn language is biological. Our brains are configured for language. If you're still not convinced, how about this? There's been a lot of research done on other language acquisition theories, and the results there are just as clear. Maybe you think we can pick up language quicker than other behavioral skills, that there's nothing special about it except how fast we do it. Okay, first, of course kids make mistakes. Calling a deer horsey the first time they see one, saying I eat it instead of I ate. But there's all sorts of mistakes that kids don't make that it seems like they should. For example, when asking a question, Teddy is happy can turn into, is Teddy happy? But Teddy dressed up as Alice can never turn into, dress Teddy up as Alice? Kids never make mistakes like that. Second, if language was just something you picked up without having a blueprint in your brain, it should be possible to approximate some part of it with computer modeling. That's exactly what one linguist tried to do in 2011. She designed 20 different computer models of how the English stress system could be acquired. So what syllables should be pronounced more strongly than others, and what factors matter for deciding that? And the researcher didn't run this experiment only once. She did it 1,000 times for each model, with different versions paying attention to different factors. So how many of these models nailed English? 3. 3 out of 20,000 total trials. And yet, basically every English-speaking child gets this right. That strongly suggests that there's something very special going on with language. But it's not just that all babies do the same things that make us think that language is innate, that it's something we're born with. It's that kids get so good at language so quickly. Let's consider what your average 2.5-year-old knows about language. They know what sound combinations are possible for their language, so they know what a possible word sounds like. They know the word order for their language. So a Turkish kid will know that a verb comes after the object, but a French kid will know that it's the other way around. They know how to make questions and what sorts of questions it's grammatically okay to ask. They know how to use modifiers like adjectives and adverbs. Now, think about what your average toddler knows about, like, everything else. They know a whole lot about how language works at an age where they can't add 2 plus 2, or tie their shoes, or reliably use a bathroom. So why are kids so good? Why can they learn so fast, make so few mistakes, and succeed where sophisticated computer models fail? How do they know all of this without having it explicitly taught to them? It's because they already know how language can work. Deep in their brains, in their genes, babies have the abstract rule sets that tell them what's possible and what's not. All babies start the same way with the same linguistic abilities. Then they apply the data they hear to the universal grammar in their heads, and they make little linguistic miracles happen every single day. So we've reached the end of the Ling Space for this week. We'll be coming back to talk more about child language in the future. But if you were paying attention this time, you learned that nativist and generativist ideas mean that we think language is innate, but not that any particular language is. That babies go through the same stages of development no matter what language they're learning, and that kids know a whole lot about how language works at a very young age. The Ling Space is written and produced by me, Moti Lieberman. It's directed by Adèle-Élise Prévost, our production assistant is Georges Coulomb, and our music and sound design is by Shane Turner. Our educational consultant.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else finds that fascinating. I love listening to him. The part about language is innate, but not any particular language. You're not born with German. You're not born with Mandarin, but you're born with something in your brain that accommodates language. And I like the comparison that he talks about. He says, look at all the language that very, very young children accumulate. They know more words than they can speak, but they're increasing the number of words they can speak almost exponentially. So they can do all of this with language at a very young age, but can't figure out what 2 plus 2 is, or even 1 plus 1. Can't use the bathroom, can't tie their shoes. And the fact that babies all over the world, no matter what language their families speak, they're doing the same thing. Not necessarily at the same time, but in the same exact sequence. That tells us there's something going on in the brain that, thank goodness, equips us for language. No other mammal can say this. Okay, so as teachers, it's important to think about what are your students coming to the classroom with, particularly if you're teaching early childhood. And the article that we're about to tackle is really about early childhood, but then talks about a study that follows up on these children through the years. So it's a longitudinal study called the 30 million word gap that all teachers need to know about. Okay, so even though language is innate and our brains are equipped for language, that doesn't mean that all children are in the environment that nurtures language. And that is the $30 million question that stems from this study. So let me pull up the study. And those of you who already looked at this study in another class, either with me or someone else, just bear with us. This is a really important study. We're going to take turns reading. The 30 million word gap. In this groundbreaking study, Betty Hart, Todd Risely entered the homes of 42 families from various socioeconomic backgrounds to assess the ways in which daily exchanges between a parent and child shape language and vocabulary development. Their findings were unprecedented, with extraordinary disparity between the sheer number of words spoken as well as the types of messages conveyed to the children. After 4 years, These differences in parent-child interaction produce significant discrepancies in not only children's knowledge, but also their skills and experiences, with children from high-income families being exposed to 30 million more words than children from families on welfare. Follow-up studies show that these differences in language and interaction experiences have lasting effects on a child's performance later in life. Before we continue, I just want to point out that although this is the study that's often referenced, there have been many other studies following children and looking at their exposure to language and their use of language by class, social class. The other thing I need to point out is, although they're looking at children's language by social class and the language used in their household, they have adjusted for race and ethnicity. So, for instance, some people may assume, and this study happened during a time when welfare was big, but the study made sure that there were people from different races in each and every class category that they studied. So that's important to note. It's not like, oh, welfare, well, we know, racially who they are. Each group was mixed. Okay, I'm gonna call on you to read sections. So the next section is titled Mission. Amanda, can you read that one?
Yeah, which one again? Sorry.
Where it says mission.
Yes. Betty Hart and Todd Risley were at the forefront of educational research during the 1960s war on poverty. Frustrated after seeing the effects of their high-quality early intervention programs aimed at language school expansion prove unsuccessful in the long term, they decided to shift their focus. If the proper measures were being taken in the classroom, the only logical conclusion was to take a deeper look at the home. What difference does home life make in a child's ability to communicate? Why are the alarming vocabulary gaps between high school students from low and high income environments seemingly foreshadowed by their performance in a preschool? Hart and Risley believe that the home housed some of these answers.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. And now experimental method. Uthma, can you read that section for us?
So the experimental method you said, right? Hart and Risley recruited 42 families to participate in the study, including 13 high-income families, 10 of middle socioeconomic status, 13 of low socioeconomic status, and 6 families who were on welfare. Monthly hour-long observations of each family were conducted from the time the child was 7 months until age 3. Gender and race were also balanced with the sample.
Okay, thank you. And Evelyn, could you read results? Actually, this is long. You can share it with someone. So results, first Evelyn, and then Mandy, please. So just read like half of.
Okay. The results of the study were far more severe than anyone could have anticipated. Observers found that 86% to 98% of the words used by each child by the age of 3 were derived from their parents' vocabularies. Furthermore, not only were the words they used nearly identical, but also the average number of words utilized. The duration of their conversation and the speech patterns were all strikingly similar to those of their caregivers.
Oh, all right. Can you just read just read one more paragraph, please.
Okay. After establishing these patterns of learning through imitation, the researchers next analyzed the content of each conversation to gather a better understanding of each child's experience. They found that the sheer number of words heard vary greatly among social economic lines. On average, children from families on welfare were provided half as much experience as children from working class families, and less than a third of experience given to children from high income families. In other words, children from families on welfare heard about 616 words per hour, while those from working class families heard about 1,251 words per hour, and those from professional families heard roughly 2,153 words per hour. Thus, children from better financial circumstances had far more language exposure to draw from.
Thank you. Wow, look at those numbers. They are so, they couldn't be more different. It's shocking. Okay, who did I say? Mandy. Can you finish up that section? Start
Okay.
with in addition to.
In addition to looking at the, can you scroll down? Okay. Okay. There was, okay. In addition to looking at the number of words exchanged, the researchers also looked at what was being said within these conversations. What they found was that higher income families provided their children with far more words of praise compared to children from low income families. Conversely, children from low income families were found to endure. It got blurry.
Oh, did it?
Yeah,
Huh. Can you see it now?
it's still kind of blurry.
Oh, something might be going on. Okay, so Mandy, do you want to pass it off to somebody else?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you for reading.
Yep.
Hannah, are you there? Can you see where it says conversely? Okay, I'll read the rest of that section. Conversely, children from low-income families were found to endure far more instances of negative reinforcement compared to their peers from higher income families. Children from families with professional backgrounds experienced a ratio of, now listen to this, 6 encouragements for every discouragement. Okay, this is the language that the parent or family is using to the child. So I'll repeat that. In families with professional backgrounds, the children experience a ratio of 6 encouragements for every discouragement. For children from working class families, this ratio was 2 encouragements to 1 discouragement. Finally, children from families on welfare received on average 2 discouragements for every 1 encouragement. To ensure that these findings had long-term implications, 29 of the 42 families were recruited for a follow-up study when the children were in 3rd grade. Researchers found that measures of accomplishment at age 3 were highly indicative of performance at the ages of 9 and 10 on various vocabulary, language development, and reading comprehension measures. Thus, the foundation built at 3 had a great bearing on their progress many years to come. Okay. Inferences. Can we go back to you, Amanda? See how long. Amanda, can you read like the first half, which I have in the window there?
Yes.
Okay.
Within a child's early life, the caregiver is responsible for most, if not all, social stimulation and consequently language and communication development. As a result, how parents interact with their children is of great consequence, given it lays a critical foundation impacting the way the children process future information many years down the road. This study displays a clear correlation between the conversation styles of parents and the resulting speech of their children. This connection evidences just how problematic the results of this study may truly be.
Go ahead.
The finding that children living in poverty hear fewer than a third of the words heard by children from higher income families has a significant implications in the long run. When extrapolated to the words heard by a child within the first 4 years of their life, these results reveal a 30 million word difference. That is, a child from a high income family will experience will experience 30 million more words in the first 4 years of life than a child from a low income family. This gap does nothing but grow as the years progress, ensuring slow growth for children who are economically disadvantaged and accelerated growth for those from more privileged backgrounds.
Okay, thank you. And Clarissa, can you finish us off?
In addition to a lack of exposure to these 30 million words, the words of a child from a low-income family has typically mastered are often negative directives, meaning words of discouragement. The ratios of encouraging versus discouraging feedback found within the study, when extrapolated, evidences that by age 4, the average child from a family on welfare will hear 125,000 more words of discouragement than encouragement, when compared to the 560,000 more words of praise as opposed to discouragement that a child from a high-income family will receive. This disparity is extraordinarily vast. The next part too.
Please do.
The established connection between what a parent says and what a child learns has more severe implications than previously anticipated. Though Hart and Risley are quick to indicate that each child received no shortage of love and care, the immense differences in communication styles found along socioeconomic lines are of a far greater consequence than any parent could have imagined. The resulting disparities in vocabulary growth and language development are of great concern and prove the home does truly hold the key to early childhood success.
Okay, thank you. You guys are great readers. Close this out. What are your thoughts about this information? First, what are your thoughts? There's no right or wrong thought. And what do you think the implications are for you as a teacher or for education as a field? What do we do with this information? And was anything shocking, or does it seem like too big of an issue to even tackle? You don't have to answer all those questions. I'm just throwing out ideas. What you think?
I have a thought. So, I mean, clearly it shows the importance of hearing encouragement versus discouragement. But what struck me is how none of the information mentioned the systemic issues that face the parents of low socioeconomic status versus the parents who have the resources and energy and time, whatever, to give all of the confidence, positive praise, whatever. And it sounds like it's putting the onus on parents who are already facing so much.
Oh, I love what you're saying. It's so true. And oftentimes, that's the weakness of scholarly articles. This was not in the journal. This was in a popular publication, but oftentimes these studies are very, very narrow. This happens to be a very well done study. And usually well done studies are narrow. But because they're narrow, they kind of ignore some things that are like the elephant in the room. It's tough. I know that, well, I won't tell you about I just want to hear what you say, and then I'll talk about that after. Very good point. Okay. Any other comments about what you just read? people didn't always know that these conversations with children were so important. Um, and as they said at the end of the article, which I appreciated, you know, the fact that low-income children have been exposed to fewer words and have gotten more discouragement over encouragement. There's no conclusion we can make about the love in that household. We're not saying anything about how much the parents or the family loves their children. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? You just don't know what you don't know. I remember when, oh, Carissa, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, like, why do you think that is? Why do you think in lower income families that words of discouragement are used more than words of encouragement?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think when people are more educated, when they go to college, when they read more, they learn more. Along the way, you learn like that this is helpful, that this is normal, and this is helpful to encourage your child, and that it could affect your child adversely if you're always either criticizing or pointing out dangers. Now, here's one thing is that when you live in challenged communities, there are more dangers. So as a consequence, that could be part of why there are more scolding, right? Don't run out into that street. Don't this, don't, you know. And then there's stress, right? So I think that stress is part of it. Not that high income families are not stressed, but they tend to have more support. Okay, so if you have someone, say a nanny, even if it's a part-time nanny in your home, that gives you breathing room, right? So when you get home, maybe someone has already cooked the dinner, and now you can relax with your children and have conversations with them. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think it has very little to do with the number of words you know. I think that what helps a lot is just having those conversations, no matter if you've had an 8th grade education or you've been to college. Exposing children to language, whether it's reading to them, talking to them, labeling things around the house so they know what a chair is, what the word looks like. All of that is helpful, but a lot of people just don't know. I know when, and I'm college educated, no one really told me that you're supposed to talk to babies. I mean, I knew that you have conversations with children, that's important. But when I learned that you had conversations with babies and that this is very helpful, when I had my first child, my daughter Dana, I remember the first time I took her to the supermarket, and I knew, at that point I knew, I'm supposed to be talking to my baby. But I was young, I was a little embarrassed, to tell you the truth, but I did it because I knew it was good. Talking to my baby, even though she couldn't talk back, pointing out things on the shelf. But a lot of people don't know that. I hope that answers your question, but I don't know if I have the complete answer. I'm sure there are some ideas in the class.
I have something to add to that. Like that's how I grew up. My parents were really strict on me and my brothers. Like growing up, like if it wasn't an A, we would get in trouble. From what I learned growing up like that, they told us that they were strict with us because they didn't want the same life that they had for us. So they wanted us to be better than them, move higher than them, like don't not go through the same struggles that they did. And like that's how they learned. So they thought that that was the best way for them to teach us how to do that.
And that's how people learn to parent, actually. You know, they reflect on their own experiences. And usually they do exactly what was done to them. Sometimes they reflect on their own experiences and they say, you know, I want to do something different. But usually, you know, people who are kind of like barking commands at their children and very rarely giving encouragement, that's what was done with them. And so that is like the definition of parenting. As a result, you know, the vocabulary used, I was actually surprised, 660 words a minute. But when you, an hour, I'm sorry, was it a minute or an hour? Seemed like a lot, but actually if you listen in a room to a family that amount of time, you know, if it's a family that uses lots of conversation, it's going to be a lot more than that. Some families don't talk at dinner. Some don't sit at the dinner table together. That's, you know, not really common these days. I think that most families don't sit together at the dinner table. And many who sit at the dinner table don't have conversations. All of this is key. I'm going to say something else about that. Any other comments? Oh, someone said in the chat something. Evelyn, do you want to add what you experienced with your parents in terms of language especially? And actually, let me point out that because we'll have non-English speaking parents and families in our classrooms, it doesn't mean they shouldn't talk to them. Actually, any language, conversation in any language is helpful because it makes the child more fluent in language, period. But I want us all to remember what, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, yeah, I experienced the same thing. Like, my parents were very like focused like on our education, so they really encouraged that. And going back to what you said about the dinner table in my family, because before my dad would used to work in the evening, so we wouldn't see him as often. We would always have dinner together or like lunch together in the weekends. So we would like have like conversations with each other, and it was like a mix between English and Spanish because my sisters, we would communicate in English, and then with my parents, we would speak in Spanish.
Oh, so that's nice. So you got both. And that helps the brain, you know that.
Yeah, I tend to speak more in English, but I do try to speak in Spanish, just so I can become more fluent. But yeah, I experienced both languages growing up.
That's good. And like I said, the more and more language, the better, no matter what that language is. Even with reading, you know, I think some parents think it's crazy that the child wants to hear the same book over and over again. That child is falling in love with that book and thus falling in love with books. All of that is really important. But I think about I teach social work also, and I taught social work course this morning. And students were talking about their internships and the families they work with and the stressful situations that they're in because, like Kay said, there's an extreme lack of resources for many families in this country. There's a tremendous gap between the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots are basically trying to make it from day to day. So actually, you know, a more equal society would help the situation. Oh, but I wanted to say, when I was a principal, my school started in preschool, went preschool to 8th. And most of those years, we had a very long waiting list to get into the school at every grade, but especially for preschool. And so I thought, what is it that we can do to help these kids be more ready for preschool? I mean, in a way, they're captive because they're on the waiting list. So we know that at some point they'll probably get in. What can we do with those families? So I created a partnership with Suzuki Or, which is a musical program for young children. We got a grant for Suzuki Or to visit the families once a week. I mean, it's not much, but it's something, and that's a form of stimulation. The music teachers would talk to the parents about the experience with the child present. So there are ways, I think, when you guys move into, your teaching positions and as you move into management roles, you can do something similar and even better than that. So I encourage you to completely think out the box because we have to. Here we are in the richest society and we see these tremendous disparities. So we have to think out of the box. Okay, so I have some fun memes about babies and language. So then I asked her, why would I want a train going into my mouth? Did your mom do that? I know I did that with my baby. Come on, the choo-choo train is coming, with the school. Anyway.
I do that at work.
Really? Okay, yeah. But you wonder what the babies are thinking. What's wrong with this person? Can effortlessly learn any language, but only while you're too young to care. That's so true, right? You're too young to really care. You don't have the meta-linguistic skills, but wow, you can absorb language literally effortlessly. You mean to tell me you talk to the dog with the same voice? And we do this. We do this because our goal is for language to be received by the young children and babies. And we think, and this is across cultures, that if we have lots of interesting intonation, if we exaggerate words, if we talk slowly, that is more palatable for the baby. Come on. We talk like that, and they do it across cultures. But we use the same voice with the dog. He's developing fine. The babies in those commercials aren't really talking. Well, I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks that's funny, but now they have babies in commercials who really actually look like they're talking. And it's a voiceover. But the mom came in with her baby, worried because her baby wasn't talking. This is very common. Even though children learn language in the same order of acquisition, they start at different ages. They go at different paces. Teachers understand, most teachers, and parents need to understand it too. And I've always felt like having a parent university in school was a good idea. I like my first word to be memorable and profound, but I know I'll wake up from a nap one day and blurt out, "Mama," like everybody else. The development of language. Ba, 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 ba. Pre-linguistic, bilingual. Ba, phonology. Ball, semantics. I want ball, grammar. Give me the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. into viewing. You know what? I'm going to give you a treat and let you get out early. I don't want to start this acquisition series and finish in the middle. Are there questions, comments, concerns? So you have an assignment coming up. When is that due?
Tomorrow.
Okay. Any questions about anything?
I thought the deadline was the 30th for the
Changed
policy
it.
memo.
Yes, I changed it to the 30th. Yes. Thank you.
And we have to do it in APA citation.
Yes, please.
With PA.
Seems like there's a date I need to tell you about. Give me a second. Don't go anywhere. Hold on.
So for the policy memo, you want 4 paragraphs total, including the policy, right? Or like according to one of the ones.
Yes. But it could be a little longer. I mean, it's not, it's really quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Mm. Uh-huh. Okay, I'm gonna have to email you that date. Wait a minute. Don't hang up yet. Okay, there's a date coming up, which apparently I did not write in my book yet. But someone is going to visit us from the library to talk about getting scholarly articles for your final project. And at that point, you will already have the list of topics, a long list of topics to choose from for your final project. So I'll be sending those out to you and posting that on D2L so you can take a look at all the topics and see what you want to do, such that by the time we meet with the librarian, you'll know what your topic will be. I write everything down for this discussion. Right? Let me look one more time. Oh, okay, here it is. Okay, maybe you could put this in your book. October 19th is when he will come to our class to give us the scholarly research orientation. But way before that, I'll send you a list of topics and you can kind of at least narrow down to no more than 2 topics. And this is for your annotated bibliography and your literature review. Okay. And if there's anything else I remember, then I'll email you. Okay. Any more questions?
Next week is asynchronous, correct?
It is asynchronous, so you'll be hearing from me on Sunday with the task due for next week. So we won't meet in person over Zoom. Okay. Yes, it was switched, Hannah, to the 30th. Homework this week. Just do your reading. Yeah, just do your reading. And then, of course, next week there'll be the online activities, which count for participation. So it's very important. If there's anything that slipped my mind, I will email you. So be sure to be checking your emails and have a safe